we're going to read a story today. And we're going to start reading stories about encounters. You know what an encounter is? An encounter is when people or even wild animals, it's when people meet together. They encounter one another. In your reader book on page, well, I don't know what page it is, 73, I guess, or 74. It's the beginning of Unit 2. There's a picture of a great, big, huge grizzly bear. And it says encounters. So, a chance meeting is what they call it. It's where people or animals meet together. Sometimes, generally, an encounter is when they don't know, they're not expecting it. So anyway, so the stories that we're going to read, that's not all about the old Wild West, but this one just so happens to be. It's called Kit Carson, who, by the way, was a real person. And the grizzly bears, what kind of encounter do you think they're going to have? They're going to meet up. Kit Carson's going to have an encounter with a grizzly bear. I mean, you can tell that by the name of the story. So I want you to take a look. Well, before we talk about the picture that I have on the screen, I was going to tell you a little bit about Kit Carson. He was a frontiersman and a scout and a guide in the early West. Kit Carson was a true mountain man. When he was born in 1809, his family moved to the western frontier, and Kit was reared in a world of traders and trappers and Indians. Kit Carson served in the Mexican War and the American Civil War. Later, he became a brigadier general and commanded the men at Fort Garland. And then he died May 23rd of 1868. He died in Colorado. Now I want you to take a look at this picture. Now this is a real picture that I found. Now it's not my family. I just found this on the internet. And I wanted you to take a look at it. This looks like, and it seems like it's giving you a good idea of, what it might have been to live back in the day. And I don't know where this was taken, but I would assume somewhere on the frontier because it looks pretty. They look kind of rough, don't they? Now, doesn't look like they have much, very little. What do you think that you have today, some things that you have today that they wouldn't have had back in this day? What would have been the hardest to live without that you have today? For me, I think it would be electricity. It'd be hard to live without electricity because you couldn't keep warm or cool. You'd have to do it either by fire or by the breeze, if there was a breeze. You didn't have fans or air conditioning or electric heaters. Lots. Of course, you could use a lamp, one of those little kerosene lamps that they used. But cooking had to have been hard because they had to use a cook stove. Hard to adjust the heat and make it just right. So for me, I think it'd be hardest to live without electricity. You see the clothes that they're wearing? Look at what the women wear. Long dresses, don't they? See the men, they've all got hats on. The women put their hair up in buns. Even this little boy right here, that's a little boy. Look at the little hat he's got on. And he's got a little dress thing on. I think back in those days, in the early days, little tiny boys, like little toddler boys, would wear little dresses, kind of like, not like a girl dress, but they had a certain name. And then when the boy, I think, turned 5 or 6, he would then get to wear breeches, they called it. So he must be maybe 3 or 4 years old. And I don't know what year this was taken either. But anyway, I thought it was a pretty interesting picture. Would you have liked to have lived back then? I think it would have been neat to live back then. Of course, you wouldn't have thought it was neat. It would just be your way of life. And, but I think it would be really cool to go back to that time period. All right, so before we start reading, I'm going to bring up your some words that we're going to come across in our story. Here's the first sentence. They hoisted the flag to the top of the pole. What do you think hoisted means? Raised it up is what it means. The bear clumsily lumbered toward the cabin. Lumbered. What do you think that means? Like kind of ran in a funny way, like a big bear just running. Okay? The worn fur on the bear's mangy back stood straight up. What do you think mangy means? Kind of sickly like, or like not a lot of hair. What about this one? The brown bears, also called Bruins, used their claws as weapons. So that's just another name for a brown bear. The two boys began to tussle until one of them was hurt. What's tussle mean? Have you ever been in a tussle? Like a little fight, kind of, not like a bad fight, but just a little fight. A tussle is what that is. All right, so let's go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and change the screen. Now, if you would turn in your book, in your reader book, to page 74. And we're going to start reading. And we're going to read this story. This is a really good story. I've read this before. Let's go ahead and look at the top of the page underneath where it says Kit Carson and the Grizzly Bears. I'm going to read that little section kind of at the top there. In the days when the West was wild and untamed, brave men journeyed far to explore this vast wilderness. Kit Carson was one of these brave men. He traveled across the United States, blazing trails, trapping for furs, and fighting Indians. This true story tells of one adventure Kit Carson had in the Wild West. This is a true story. That's awesome. All right, so I'm going to start reading. Remember, you've got to follow along with me, okay? Now, here's something for you to listen for and watch for as we read. How does Kit Carson show that he's brave? And what problem do the grizzly bears present to Kit? Okay? You listen for that as we read, okay? All right. Men, we need meat, and we need it soon. With no rain in so long, all the animals have gone looking for a better place to graze. I can't say that I blame them either. The leader of the camp scratched his head and looked around. Any of you men want to try to catch us some meat? I think I can. The voice belonged to Kit Carson, the 24-year-old crack shot. That's the way, Kit. The other man slapped his back and shook his hand. If anyone can do it, you can. Kit hoisted his rifle to his shoulder. I'm heading out on foot and I aim to come back with some supper meat. Kit Carson was one man who usually did what he said he would do, and in his soft moccasins he padded noiselessly through the underbrush for almost a mile. Then his keen eyes spotted a clear imprint in the sand. Elk, he whispered, running his fingers over the delicate grooves. And these tracks are pretty fresh. They can't be too far away. Sure enough, as Kit followed the tracks through the trees, he soon came upon a whole herd of elk grazing on the few plants that they could find. Only a mile away from the camp, Kit chuckled, and those men thought they weren't any animals anywhere near here. Well, I'll be bringing supper home pretty soon. With a snap and a crack of his trusty rifle, Kit brought one elk down to the ground. He headed toward it with a satisfied smile on his face. But he never got to the downed elk. A roar sounded through the forest, and two grizzly bears lumbered clumsily through the trees. The fur on their mangy backs bristled, and their lips curled back in a snarl, showing long white fangs. And Kit's gun was empty. There was no time to reload it. Dropping his rifle, he scrambled hastily up a little aspen tree. Even though he climbed as high as he could, his feet were just barely out of the bear's reach. He looked down at the angry Bruins trying to swap at him with their big paws. Kit tucked his legs under him the best he could. He watched the grizzlies rip some of the bark off the tree, pull at the roots and tear at the branches, taking an occasional wild swipe at him. Well, this can't go on much longer, Kit decided. He couldn't let the situation get the best of him, so he did some thinking. Even though a grizzly was the roughest, toughest animal around, he still had one very tender spot, his nose. Kit pulled out his hunting knife and whacked off a small tree branch, and this was his new weapon. As soon as one bear got close enough, Kit was ready. Well, Mr. Grizzly, I can't say I'm too sorry to do this to you. Whap! He smacked the bear in the nose. The bear fell down and grabbed his nose with his paws, howling in pain. The other bear came toward Kit. The new weapon hit its mark again. The other bear went down. Kit couldn't help but laugh. My life may be in danger, but you two Bruins are a funny sight to see. Another whole hour went by before the grizzlies finally decided that this battle wasn't worth the trouble. With snorts of pain and disgust, they lumbered back into the wilderness. After Kit was quite convinced that they were gone for good, he climbed down, making his way with stiff legs to the spot where the elk lay waiting. He discovered that it had been eaten by wolves. Hours after dark, Kit trudged back into camp. When he told his story, the other men laughed so hard that they cried. They didn't even mind that Kit had come back without any meat for supper. Kit laughed too, but I never have been so scared in all my life. Kit Carson, said a friend, you're a wonder. You're the only man I've ever known who could tussle with grizzly bears without a rifle and win. Great story. All right, let's go back to the front part of the story and let's look at some questions just so I can make sure that you've understood the story and you can answer some of these questions. So, what's the problem in the camp? There's no food. What needs to be done? Somebody needs to go hunting. Would you have done that? Would you have gone out to be the one to go hunting and looking for food? How do you know the men are confident that Kit can do the job? Remember when he said it, one of them, they slapped him on the back. Well, if anybody can do it, you can, Kit. Remember that? What does the author mean by stating that Kit Carson is a crack shot? What does that mean? That means when he aims at something, he shoots it and he does not miss it. That's what a crack shot is. Look at page 75. See where he's aiming that rifle at that big elk? Ooh, that is a big elk. What is Kit's first clue that there are animals nearby? He finds fresh tracks. Why do you think Kit ran his fingers over the delicate grooves? He probably, like if this is the track, he probably went just real gently like that. Why do you think he did that? Just studying it, seeing maybe if it was fresh, if it was still kind of damp, maybe even what kind of animal it was. Why does Kit chuckle when he sees that herd of elk? Why does he kind of chuckle to himself? What did the rest of the men think? That there were no more animals. They thought, well, they've gone to graze somewhere else, so there's nothing else around here. Can you read the sentence that tells how Kit kills one of the elk? Read it so you can hear the sound of the gun. It's on 75. It is going to be, let's see, it's going to be, it's the last paragraph on page 75 where it starts with a snap. Can you read that? With a snap and a crack of his trusty rifle, Kit brought one big elk down to the ground. Good. Why does the author use the words snap and crack when he's talking about the gun? Does it kind of sound like a gun, the snap and the crack? Those words kind of don't really sound like it, but it kind of goes with it. And if you were to say, if somebody asked you how a gun, you could say, well, snap, crack. I mean, just kind of pop like that. So it kind of adds a little bit to the story when they choose to use words that kind of sound like the sound they're trying to make. What character traits describe a man who usually does what he says he will do? What does that mean he is? A man that says he'll do something and he does it. That man is honest. You could say he's dependable, trustworthy. Those are all characteristics that we should all strive to be. Look at page 76 where he's climbed up in that tree. Look at those claws on that bear. And there's not one bear but two. I bet he was scared. I would have been going, no! I would have been screaming my head off. What stops Kit from reaching the downed elk? The two big bears come out. What picture of the two bears does the author create in your mind? Because it says that they're lumbering how's it said? They lumbered clumsily through the trees, just kroom, 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 just running, and they're big and just roar, probably banging up against the trees, and the leaves are flying everywhere and cracking sticks and things like that. So the author uses some good words to help us see those bears just running through the woods through him. Why doesn't Kit use his gun to protect himself? He used it on the elk, and he doesn't have time to reload it. And in those days, you had to reload your gun. It didn't just shoot off, whatever that's called. It didn't do that in those days. Look at page 77. How does clear thinking save Kit just in time? What did he do with his gun? He dropped his gun and he went up a tree. That was good, clear thinking. How would you have reacted? Would you have done the same thing? I don't know what I would have done. I probably would have screamed and ran, and then I would have been the bear's supper. That's probably what would have happened to me. But that's just me. All right, good. All right, so let's look at... I don't have my Bible close by me. My Bible is actually in there because we just came home from church a little while ago. I wanted to look up 2 Timothy 1:7, but we don't have to do that right now. Usually I have something close by me where I can look something like that up, but I don't have it. So the man, when he finally comes home, he goes to get the elk, and what did he notice about the elk? The wolves had gotten to it, so no elk, even though he shot it. So he goes back. Were the men upset that he didn't bring home supper? No, they're just listening to his story and just laughing about it. And what did Kit admit to the men? He had never been so scared. He admitted that to him. Is Kit embarrassed about being scared? No. Well, why isn't he embarrassed? A lot of times men would be embarrassed to be scared about it. But why isn't he embarrassed? He's just being honest. I mean, honestly, this is what happened. And yes, I was scared. It's okay to be that way. Now, as Christians, why is a Christian able to be brave and act bravely in a situation like that? Because we have our trust in the Lord, and we have the Holy Spirit with us. So if we can just remember that, right? All right, let's look at our work text pages. I like that story. And to know, too, it was a true story. Get your work text pages out. We have 2 work text pages. We have pages 29 and 30 to do today. Let's see here. Let's look at page 29. All right, this says, read the following paragraphs. Read and follow the directions below each paragraph. So I'm going to help you with number 1. And then I'm going to have you pause your program and have you finish number 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So let's do number 1. Kit Carson volunteered to go find some meat. He left the camp, moving silently in his soft moccasins. 2 miles from camp, he located a herd of elk. The herd grazed peacefully, unaware of his presence. So let's read underneath there what we need to do. Underline the sentence that tells why the elk didn't realize Kit was near. What sentence up there tells why? How about he left the camp, moving silently in his soft moccasins? In that sentence, he was quiet. He had those soft moccasins on, so you couldn't hear him walking. So you would underline that sentence because that tells why. Can you circle the words that tell you how far Kit was from the camp? He was 2 miles from the camp. So you'd circle 2 miles. Good. All right. I want you to go ahead and pause this, and I want you to do number 2, 3, and 4. Just read the paragraph and then do what it says. And then turn this back on, and I'll help you with the next page. Did you finish the paragraphs? All right, let's look at the paragraphs. On paragraph number 2, did you underline his rifle cracked once and a large elk crashed to the ground? Did you underline that? That was the sentence that should be underlined. If you didn't, can you do that for me? His rifle cracked once and a large elk crashed to the ground. Did you circle a loud roar? Okay. Number 3, did you underline, after much thought he remembered that bears have very tender noses? And did you circle a branch? That would be the correct one on number 3. And then on number 4, did you underline wolves had already torn the carcass? And then you should circle, you're a wonder, Kit. Did you do that? Good deal. All right, let's look at page 30. Let's look at page 30. All right, do you know what the word descriptive means? Well, if you think of the word descriptive, what's the root word or the base word of that word? Describe. Describe. Look at the very top of page 30. There's a green oval. Let's read that. Authors use descriptive words to help us see a character or action more clearly. The author could have said, Kit saw an elk's track. He could have said that, right? But instead he said, the author said, Kit's keen eyes spotted an imprint. So he used way better words to help us see better what he saw. Instead of just saying, oh, he saw a footprint. Well, whatever. But if you say his keen eyes, that means he was just looking really hard and they saw an imprint. So they used really salt and peppery words is what I would call those. You see where it says make a match. All right, we're going to write the correct letter to match the author's descriptive words with plain words. Okay, so let's look at number 1. A good hunter. So let's look at A through F and see if you can find the one that talks about a good hunter but uses much better wording. Can you find it? How about D? A crack shot. Did you get that? D. Okay, that explains what that is. All right. All right, what about number 2? Walked quietly. Look over there. Let's see if we can find where something explains walked quietly. What about B? Padded noiselessly through the underbrush. That would be walked quietly. So you'd put B on number 2. All right, let's look at number 3. Cut a stick. Can you find the one over on the side that would talk about cutting a stick or cut a stick? How about E? Whacked off a small tree branch. That's the same thing as saying he cut a stick. Okay? Good deal. Well, I'd like for you to pause it, and I'd like for you to finish number 4, 5, and 6. And then on number 1 and 2 at the bottom, what you're going to do is you're going to just read the little sentence, and it tells you what page it's on inside your book. And then you are going to find and write the sentence the author used to say that. So in other words, on page 75, it's not going to say Kit shot 1 elk. There's another sentence that means Kit shot 1 elk. And that's what I'd like for you to do. Okay, is you'll find the sentence that means that on that page and write that sentence down, okay? I'm not going to grade this page, but I'd like to see it just to make sure that you pick the right sentence, okay? Good deal. That's all for today.